I think your guess is as good as mine.
کاتنا
Not
باش
the
هاوڕێیان
answer here. Iran
ئەو
presumably has
هەواڵەی کە
various
هاوڕێ
options.
بوون دەستی پێکردوا تا
Given,
دەرگای جهەنەمی
taking into account that Israel clearly is the militarily more superior force in any confrontation with Iran, and has demonstrated not only with the attacks on Iran in recent hours, but over a period of time, that its reach inside Iran is significant. What the last few hours supposedly have also demonstrated is that Israeli assertions that it last year had wiped out Iranian anti-air defenses, that those assertions are proving correct. Israeli pilots are not reporting any anti-aircraft attacks on their flights over Iran. What Iran's options are, presumably we're going to see a much fiercer barrage of missile attacks with much more high caliber missiles than we saw last year. Last year were attacks calibrated to show or demonstrate capability rather than to destroy or hurt Israel. This time round, Iran will want to hurt Israel. There's obviously the question of whether or not Iran will attack US facilities, and equally importantly, if it decides to do so, where it will attack those facilities. Iran is probably unlikely to want to draw the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE and other Gulf states into this conflict, but it has not excluded attacking US military facilities in those countries. And of course, it has a variety of asymmetric options, even though its axis of resistance, groups like Hezbollah, have been severely
James. So we'll leave it there for now, though. Thanks very much for your thoughts, as always. Now, the crisis in the Middle East is sending oil prices surging. Let's cross straight to our reporter here in our newsroom, Katie Silva, with more on the market reaction. Katie, what are we seeing?
So far, Steve, we've seen oil trading significantly up. Both Brent crude and NYMEX now up around about 9%. At one point, it's up to 11% up. Now, all this comes because we're seeing increased fears when it comes to the global supply. We must remember about 30% of global energy comes from the Middle East region. 5 of the top 10 oil producing countries are all there, as well as the fact that we're seeing this potential conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, which of course Iran is part of the border there, and that connects the Gulf with the Arabian Sea. About a fifth of the oil goes through that passage every single day. Now, one analyst I've been speaking with says that part of this is about a correction, that the market had been underpricing the price of oil, basically shrugging off concerns in the Middle East for too long, expecting that OPEC was going to be increasing production more than perhaps it was going to, as well as pricing in these tensions when it comes to US and China. They say now this is something of a correction, but we may see more in the coming days, particularly given this uncertainty about whether or not we may see continued strikes from Israel, as well as what the response and retaliation from Iran might be. And one analyst I spoke with said that could well include, for example, targeting oil infrastructure, as well as potentially targeting that passage in the Strait of Hormuz, particularly because President Trump has said that keeping oil prices low is something that he's very keen on. Now, this impacts everybody. Oil impacts the price of the cost to heat one's home, cost of petrol, flying, transporting of goods. So all of that, we're also seeing the impact of. Stocks here in the region also trading lower, all down around 1%, and Nikkei down about 1.5%. India's market's just opening down 1% as well, Steve.
Thanks, Katie, for keeping an eye on that. For more on the outlook of oil and the reaction that we're seeing, I'm joined by Andy Lippo from Lippo Oil Associates. Andy, what's your take then? The oil, what do you think the oil market is most concerned about when we talk about what we've been seeing the last few hours? And not just the attacks from Israel, but perhaps the retaliation from Iran as well.
Well, good morning, Steve. I think that's exactly right, that the oil market is really concerned that Iran will retaliate by attacking either Israel or American targets that really could lead to a major escalation in the fighting and ultimately an oil supply disruption driving up prices.
Yeah, and that's not something that the US president will want to see, but we've already seen oil prices spike over 10% today. What's your outlook then on where things could go from here?
Well, I think that if this leads to a suspension of Iranian oil exports, we can see oil prices rise from yesterday's settle between $5 and $7.50 a barrel. The greatest fear in the oil market is that Iran starts attacking softer oil targets throughout the region, ultimately impacting transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. And if that were the case, I would see oil prices at $100 a barrel, since 20% of the world's oil supply transits through that strait.
And just to elaborate on what you were saying there about Iran attacking perhaps softer oil targets. What targets are you referring to?
Well, I mean, they can do a number of things by attacking tankers that are transiting the waterway carrying oil destined for U.S. refineries, and as a result, shutting down the shipping lanes. Iranians know full well that Donald Trump wants lower energy prices, and if oil prices spike, bringing gasoline prices higher with it, then that could be politically damaging to Trump and put a wedge between Trump and Israel.
And what about other OPEC Plus countries? The Middle East is a significant oil-producing region. How do you see them responding to what's transpiring?
Well, we've already seen OPEC Plus over the last 3 months restore their voluntary production cuts of 2.2 million barrels a day from several years ago. Those cuts are expected to be fully restored by September or October. So they have added enough supply to offset the loss of Iranian exports. However, they still do have a significant amount of spare capacity should events go out of control, if you will. However, much of that oil still needs to transit the Strait of Hormuz.
Thanks very much, Andy, for your thoughts. Appreciate your time. Andy Lippo from Lippo Oil Associates. And before we go, let's recap what has been a very busy couple of hours following the events of Israel launching strikes into Iran.
دەنگ باش بوو زۆر باشە زۆر چاکە باشە منیش بەردەوام دەکەم زۆر چاکە داوای لێبوردنەکەم کە دەنگ نەبوو ئیتر